Character tropes are very prevalent in many stories in a multitude of mediums. They are great for classifying characters and their traits to help identify how they will function within the story, as well as how they will interact with other characters or their environment. Sure, it could be a bit predictable if a character is too in tune with their designated tropes with little to no deviation, but a good writer will know how to use those tropes as a baseline for the characters to further develop them from set traits. By doing this, it will unbind them from their shackles of their perceived category, or by putting an interesting twist on set tropes, can reinvigorate the audience with the familiar. Character tropes are abundant in a lot of media, and none more so than the medium of anime. Anime loves picking an assortment of stuff from their massive grab bag of tropes. They are so prevalent in fact that they become their own category that is recognizable within the anime sphere. Character tropes are such a common occurrence that they even have their own archetype classification, the dere. The dere archetypes usually possess very distinct characteristics and qualities that help differentiate and classify the characters in said archetypes. Some archetypes share characteristics or even have a complete overlap with others, resulting in mixing and matching between the tropes. However, in a lot of cases, some characteristics become so prominent in a character that it becomes pretty easy to identify them. The word dere comes from dere, a Japanese word meaning kind, lovable, or in love, or could be an onomatopoeia that represents love struck. So the dere tropes have obvious roots in regard to love. More often than not, the stories they're usually in pivot around a romance plotline or functions as a subplot within genres of other stories. However though, dere love isn't just exclusive to potential romance but can also include love for other things, such as family or hobbies. They functionally have three primary roles they fill in almost every anime they are represented in. 1. Potential love interest to one of the characters. 2. A type or role within their group dynamic. Or 3. How they exercise their dareness towards concepts or objects. But before we dive into these roles, let's dissect and discuss the most important part of this video. What the heck is a tsundere? Well, like I said earlier, the dere archetypes have very distinct qualities that help differentiate between them, with some overlap here and there. The tsun part of the term is derived from the word tsun, which in Japanese commonly means irritable, aloof, not friendly or forthcoming, or cool and distant. So, combining the words tsun and dere, you get the term tsundere, and because the respective meanings results in an archetype who is one part harsh and hostile, and other part attractive and lovable. The key characteristic for tsunderes is that they are adverse to their potential target of affection through aggressive and abrasive means. Their target is sometimes not even an actual person, sometimes it's an interest they are very covert about, such as a hobby or cute animals. A lot of the times they accomplish this by either being outwardly mean, rejecting or ignoring them, or brushing off any idea of love and affection. Within the community, this act is often called being tsun. The idea of straight up physically assaulting their love interest is more of a recent convention that evolved throughout the years due to overuse of the tsundere archetype. Eventually, it transformed into more of a cliche and watered down version of the archetype and isn't a necessary component of tsunderes, though it won't stop certain people from being attracted to such a trait. As to why they act in such a way towards their target of affection, well, it depends on the story. It can either be due to circumstance of the story, like in Juliet of Boarding House, where the hostility comes from the premise of opposing sides, or it could be an inherent character trait, like in Toradora, where Taiga is just naturally feisty, or in some stories it could even be both. But it ultimately boils down to hiding their true feelings of love and care with a veil of outward hostility to cover up their insecurity. However, a massive part of their appeal is when their guard is down and the veil parts away, something is revealed about them, their dere side comes to the surface. Often, their cute side is displayed in a moment of emotional vulnerability, where they speak or act on their true feelings, as well as accompanied by the notorious blush. And over the course of the story, they eventually open up more, minimizing the typical tsundere tendencies for more genuine interactions. You see, it's that moment of reveal that acts as a sort of catharsis for the viewer, as putting up with a harsh act and getting treated to a chance of seeing something cute makes it out to be like some sort of reward they earned. Tsunderes are the literal definition of playing hard to get, and for many, the chase is worth the effort. Circling back to the three functional roles of the dere archetypes, the tsundere can easily slip into any one of those functions. As a romantic love interest, the tsundere is usually vying for the main character's attention among the plethora of other love interests, in some weird twisted competition of who could win the main character's heart first, like they are contestants in The Bachelor. Of course, depending on who the main character is or what kind of story is being told, The dere archetypes can either take on a more proactive approach, with storylines dedicated to them and their relationship with the protagonist, or they can take a more laid-back approach and have the main character stumble onto interactions with them and have the main character engage with them with some kind of goal in mind. In the Tsundere's case, the main goal of any main character is to break through their harsh exterior and soften their personality up so they become a bit more amiable. The second functional role a dere archetype can take is how they are within a group dynamic and explore their chemistry with the rest of the cast. It's prominent in slice of life or school-bound series to have a checklist on the type of people to have within the group. The tsundere is more or less usually found within these groups, and it's up to the writer on who the other roles will be filled with. Within these constraints, a tsundere only gets to roll by how they act with other characters, usually functioning as a straight man to the group's antics, calling out the group's faults or follies, or by acting disagreeable to a specific character in the group. Oftentimes, this person is their potential applied love interest only if they act that way towards that specific person. I know I said these collection of archetypes are usually found together within slice of life series, but they can honestly be found in any type of story as long as the group dynamic is present, like in adventure stories or band-centric stories. The third functional role of the dere archetypes is how they feel or act towards a specific object or concept. In this way, the tsundere is less of a role the character needs to fill and more of a character trait. Sometimes the plotlines will explore how they feel about sports or certain hobbies, or items like cute things, and not being totally honest how they feel about said things. The tsundere aspect only manifests when said topic is brought up or becomes a focal point of the story, meaning the character usually acts like a normal person, unbound by the constraints of the archetype, and only acts that specific way when said things pop up. And when it does appear, you can usually expect them to behave in a way normally seen as a typical tsundere would, harsh, irritated, and dismissive of the notion while holding their true feelings to themselves. But as the story progresses, they tend to become more open or accepting of their desires, leading them to either embrace it or let it be known to the group and audience how they feel about certain things. For example, being a tsundere towards a sport will eventually lead to them joining and enjoying said sport for whatever plot reason there is. Now, let's talk about gap moe and how it relates to tsunderes. Gap moe usually refers to a character trait or behavior that is perceived as a stark contrast to the audience's original impression of the character. And an obvious example would be a big, rough and tough fellow who will also show a vulnerable side of them liking cute things. This ties to tsunderes because the gap in this case is the stark contrast between their harsh attitude and their more adorable side. Of course, not all tsunderes have a gap moe trait in them. It is entirely dependent on how the writer chooses to have the tsundere character conduct themselves normally and how their moe side is displayed. A gap moe characteristic is almost written unintentionally most of the time, as we humans are naturally multifaceted creatures. We have a lot of contrasting characteristics that are inherent to the human experience. Now, I've seen a lot of discussion for the argument that tsunderes are the most realistic of the character archetypes in anime, but the notion of realism in any piece of media is subjective to the individual viewer, because not everyone shares the same experience. And anime as a genre might have more elements that some may consider more realistic, especially compared to its Western counterpart in animation, but it can be a very harmful perspective to view anime as such. Animation in general is able to convey a lot more through exaggerated or artful expression. Animation does a lot that separates it from what is typically seen in live action. The medium is not bound by the constraints of reality, yet feels familiar because a lot of art does derive from what exists in real life. The same principles can be applied to all the dere archetypes. They are formed because there is some basis and ground for the characteristics that exist in real life. It's just that in anime, some components are over-exaggerated so the characters can fit into a mold. Some may consider tsunderes the more realistic of the archetypes due to the inherent contrarian nature of humans, regardless of sex or gender. The notion that some people may be disagreeable towards particular topics or interests is a natural part of the human experience. Everyone in their life has experienced some degree of rejection, whether it be in love, career endeavors, or just general disagreements in real life. So by the end, tsunderes are about as realistic as, say, himederes. Both possess characteristics that people in reality do have, like the tsundere's harshness or the himedere's luxurious naivete. There is no doubt the tsundere is a prevalent character type within the anime medium. The characteristics are so pronounced and obvious that it's pretty easy to pick out who is the tsundere in the series, or if a character is tsundere towards something. Regardless, it is an archetype that will see continued usage within anime and manga storytelling because of how easy it is to implement conflict and intrigue with a tsundere in a story, easily engaging the viewer to what may come next of the character. Does the MC finally break through the tsundere's harsh exterior and win the prize? Or does the tsundere finally accept their feelings towards something and embrace it, leading to easy yet profound character development? It's up to the writer on what they want to convey to the audience, and as a weeb, I'm just here for the bumpy ride. While they are my least favorite of the dere archetypes, I could totally see the appeal as to why someone would dig the tsundere character. To many, the reward is definitely worth the effort.